From Microbe TV, this is TWiP, This Week in Parasitism, episode 263, recorded on August 1st, 2025. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you're listening to the podcast all about parasites. Joining me today from New York, Daniel Griffin.
Hello, everyone.
It's Friday, it's STD Day, and we got Trichomonas, right?
You got it. You got it. Good show.
Well, you know, you don't have an unlimited collection of STD ties.
That is true. It's a smaller, it's just a tiny subset.
Also joining us from Glasgow, Scotland, Christina Naula.
Hello, everybody. Good evening from Glasgow. And it's a birthday to celebrate today. It's the Swiss National Day. So me as being Swiss, you know, I need to celebrate. So I'll raise a glass later.
Is that like July 4th of the U.S.?
It is, yeah. It is. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, congratulations.
Well, it's nothing to do with me, but I can still celebrate, I suppose.
If you like these programs where we give you science, real science, no lies, no disinformation, we would love your support to continue them. Microbe TV is a 501c3 nonprofit. So in the U.S., your donations would be federal, U.S. tax deductible. Go to microbe.tv/contribute for various ways that you could contribute. So today is Reveal Day. Daniel, what are we revealing? What was the case?
All right. Well, those of you tuning back in, those of you tuning in for the first time, let me remind or introduce this case, these cases, this story. So as I was saying, I felt like the back section of our book has been a bit neglected, and the new Parasitic Disease 8th edition is now posted on our website, so you can download a copy. And we're going ahead and we're going to get hundreds of hardcover copies printed as well, because we like to give those away. But here we go. So we have three individuals involved here with a rather impressive travel history. So we have a mom, a daughter, and a son. And they reach out for guidance. So initially, one of them found something small, dark, about the size of a poppy seed embedded in their skin. And this led to a more involved investigation where they found that all three of them had similar findings, but some of these were larger, some a bit larger. One was actually described as mobile. They all feel fine, report no skin rashes. They have a number of concerns about what these are, if they might carry disease, what to do about removing them, should there be testing, treatment. Now, as I mentioned last time, the interesting travel and exposure history, they report that just prior to this, they spent a week on a remote island off the coast of Scotland with extensive hiking and tall grass, boggy areas with deer, rabbits, lots of sheep. Apparently, this was an island called Harris and Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. And then they get back, and just that Saturday, they're hiking in wooded areas around Loch Ness. They get back, I guess, onto the main island of Scotland, I guess.
Yeah, I think we call it a mainland.
The mainland, right? So now they're hiking in wooded areas around Loch Ness and the Cairngorms. No reported sightings of any monsters. Now, Sunday, they're hiking. Now they're in the United States. They're hiking on Long Island. And then Wednesday, they're up in Cape Cod. And they're hiking around in Cape Cod. So these three folks, they're like all over the place. Now, they report on Cape Cod that they followed a trail there, and there was a fallen tree. They had to actually crawl underneath it. And it was actually after that they said, "Oh, we've been crawling around. We should do a skin check." And so they've got lots of questions. So we left our emailers with a couple primer questions, I guess you'd say. What might these be? What are these objects? How do we figure out what these objects are? Is the travel history relevant? Does it matter that they were in different parts of Scotland, different parts of Long Island, different parts of Cape Cod? Are there any timing issues that might impact what we're going to recommend? Should we try to remove these? And if we are thinking about doing that, how might we approach that? And is any testing or treatment indicated?
All right. We had a good number of guesses. Christina, can you start out, please?
I can. Angelica writes, "Hello, Vincent, Christina, and Daniel. The family with black dots on their skin in episode 261 must, of course, have ticks. The larval and nymph stages of all these look like adult ticks, just smaller and black. All 3 developmental stages suck blood. It is only the final adult tick that can get as big as a pea before it falls off. Ooh. Diagnosis: use reading glasses or magnifying lens. Look for 8 small legs in the most pointed end of the dot. Treatment: brush or pick them off. Use your nails or tweezers if they are attached to the skin. Look up for a growing circular rash around the bite sites. If this occurs during the following days and weeks, a course of doxycycline should be given to treat presumed Borrelia infection. I hope all members of the family have been vaccinated against tick-borne encephalitis, an encephalitis that can cause permanent severe brain damage. An interesting consequence of repeated tick bites can be alpha-gal allergy, which in turn causes meat allergy. Oh, we've discussed that on a previous TWiP, haven't we? That was a cool one. We have this strange and rare allergy in Sweden too, and it is caused by our local ticks, our most common species being Ixodes ricinus. Thank you for a fun and always interesting pod."
In fact, the alpha-gal, we had a guest who had it,
We
right?
did. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
That was fun. And Daniel.
All right. David writes, "Greetings, doctors of TWiP. I will start with a guess regarding the blob on the 8th edition of Parasitic Diseases, Schistosoma mansoni, as shown on page 550. Is this in fact the egg? The interesting case presented in TWiP 261 indicates many potential exposure routes for small black poppy seed-sized parasites over a diverse geographic area. The TWiP 138 coverage of poppy seed infestation came down to lice found in the scalp attached to hair not embedded in the skin, so does not appear to match the current case situation. Whereas the potential exposure from overseas travel is relevant, seems possible, but unlikely given the parasites were just recently discovered, with at least one still exploring for a location to attach to. Local exposure seems a more probable source for the infestation, and tiny tick nymphs seem like the issue here for the poppy-sized specimens. Determining the particular type of tick would require close examination with magnification. Removal of the ticks is probably best accomplished by the careful use of needle-like tweezers, trying to avoid squeezing the tick to prevent the tick body contents from being effectively injected into the patient. Collectively, the ticks for lab analysis may be helpful in determining whether transmission of disease is likely. Some university labs have historically been able to do that analysis of provided samples. Perhaps that service is still available. That said, watching for any symptoms over the coming weeks would be a reasonable approach for quickly removed ticks, unless the prevalence of a particular disease is well documented in the local environment. That's my guess. Thanks for the presentation. Looking forward to finding out the true answer for this one and the next case presentation. David from Maryland.
Jason writes, "Greetings, TWiP hosts. It's a cozy 23 degrees C here in Seattle." By the way, Daniel, do you like how the temperature has just crashed overnight?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you know this, Christina, but it was over 100 degrees and it just dropped to 60 today.
Wow. What is 100 degrees in centigrades? It sounds hot, like a high fever.
It's like 38 degrees.
Oh,
yeah.
That's it's not nice.
And then what is 61 degrees? Like 16?
61 would be like, Well, 28 is 28. 20 is 68, right?
Wow, that's a shock to the system.
Yeah, huge drop.
I mean, it's going to be like this now the next couple of weeks, Daniel, according to the forecast. It's really August. It always gets cool. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm going to do our Celsius to Fahrenheit here. Or I'm going to try. So let's see. So it was I guess I could do it backwards. So it was 100 Fahrenheit, which is about 38 Celsius. And now it's down at 61, which, that's that 6116.
Wow.
So kind of amazing, right? To just drop that much. But, it dropped more in Fahrenheit because, right, in Celsius, it only dropped, No, it's a joke.
The compressed Celsius scale.
But, that's 20 centigrades difference. I mean, that is a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
You have to get your winter coat out.
Yeah.
Okay, back to Jason. In episode 261's Ectoparasites Without Borders case, the 3 jet-setting hikers appear to be hosts to several ticks. I like that name, Daniel.
I like that. Ectoparasites Without Borders. Good job.
Assuming the ticks are all members of the Ixodidae hard tick family, the parasites may take 1 to 4 weeks to become fully engorged with a blood meal. The travel history and wilderness exposure suggests there may be multiple tick species involved. Working forwards in time from the initial exposure in Scotland on day 1, the hikers may have picked up Ixodes ricinus, also known as the sheep tick. These are known to transmit Lyme disease and anaplasmosis. Days 2 and 5 saw the travelers trekking to Long Island and Cape Cod, respectively, both locations rife with Ixodes scapularis, the black-legged tick, and Dermacentor variabilis, the American dog tick. Between these 2 tick species, the hikers are at risk of acquiring Rocky Mountain spotted fever, tularemia, tick paralysis, babesiosis, and Lyme disease. Oh boy, Daniel. To mitigate the risk of disease, the hikers should remove the ticks as soon as possible, ideally using tweezers to grasp the tick as close to the head as possible. Note that ticks do not have heads in an anatomically strict sense, but instead possess a head-like structure known as a capitulum. An effort should be made to identify the tick species, especially the ones that have been attached the longest. The relative duration of attachment can be guessed at by noting the amount of blood contained within the body of the tick. If Ixodes ricinus ticks are identified, it may be inferred that these were acquired in Scotland, and there should be a higher index of suspicion for transmission of anaplasmosis and Lyme disease than the other diseases mentioned. The longer a tick is attached to the host, the higher the chances for disease transmission. Dermacentor ticks bear ornate cream-colored markings upon their dorsal body plate, also known as the scutum, and are thus relatively easy to speciate. Differentiating the 2 Ixodes genus ticks is a bit trickier, as they look virtually identical. Both possess a black scutum and black legs. Females possess a smaller scutum to accommodate larger blood meals, and the body extending beyond the scutum is dark orange. Worm regards Jason, who sends pictures of the Ixodes ricinus adult female, the Ixodes scapularis, a couple of, I guess, a female and a male and some juveniles, and the Dermacentor variabilis, males and females and nymphs and larvae. Cool.
They're really beautiful, aren't these beautiful?
Those Dermacentors are cool, yeah.
Yeah, they look nice. Do you know what I always find really puzzling is when the larvae only have 6 eggs, and then all of a sudden they grow an extra pair of legs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you need that extra pair to be an adult.
Yep.
Okay, back to you, Christina.
Okay, Joseph writes, greetings to the TWiP-tastic trio, said in classic Batman announcer voice. Oh, I failed on that one because I don't know what that Batman announcer voice sounds like. Maybe one of you can do it?
No, I can't do it.
I'm lost.
It is your friendly neighborhood lab safety specialist now writing to you just across the line from Cut and Shoot in Conroe, Texas. I was late at a party in learning that I had won a copy of PD7, but elated nonetheless. It will be proudly displayed in my office. I was kicking myself for not picking up on the Hickam reference, but alas, this is why we do what we do. We learn from our mistakes and move on. I will say that I was especially excited to work on this new case as it deals with my current concentration within my master's program. It seems the individuals mentioned are in a ticky situation. Let's get down to business. Given the family's recent outdoor activities in areas known for tick population, the most probable identification of these objects is ticks. The description of a poppy seed size is highly consistent with the nymph stage of several tick species, which are prevalent during the summer month. The larger objects could be adult ticks or ticks that have taken a blood meal, and the report of a mobile object aligns with the behavior of a tick seeking a feeding spot. Each area mentioned presents a potential exposure to different tick species and pathogens. Scotland, the Isle of Harris and Lewis, Loch Ness and the Cairngorms, the extensive hiking in tall grass and boggy areas with wildlife such as deer, rabbits and sheep created a high-risk environment for encountering the sheep tick, Ixodes ricinus. This tick is the primary vector in Europe for Lyme disease, caused by Borrelia burgdorferi. Long Island, New York and Cape Cod, Massachusetts, hiking and running in wooded areas exposed individuals to a couple of tick species of concern. The black-legged ticks, Ixodes scapularis, is the primary vector for Lyme disease, anaplasmosis and babesiosis in the eastern United States. The Lone Star tick, Amblyomma americanum, which can transmit ehrlichiosis, alpha-gal syndrome, red meat allergy, and southern tick-associated rash illness. The timing of the discovery and subsequent actions are crucial. The sooner the tick is removed, the lower the risk of disease transmission. For Lyme disease, for instance, the tick generally needs to be attached for 36 to 48 hours or more to transmit the bacteria. Given that the objects were found on a Wednesday after a weekend of hiking, some of the ticks could have been attached for a sufficient duration to transmit pathogens. It is strongly advised that the individuals attempt to remove the objects themselves using a proper technique. 1. Use fine-tipped tweezers and grasp the tick as close to the skin's surface as possible. 2. Pull upward with a steady, even pressure. Do not twist or jerk the tick, as this can cause the mouth parts to break off and remain in the skin. If this happens, try to remove the mouth parts with tweezers. If you are unable to remove them easily, leave them alone and let the skin heal. 3. After removing the tick, thoroughly clean the bite area and your hands with rubbing alcohol, an iodine scrub, or soap and water. Do not use petroleum jelly, a hot match, nail polish, or other folk remedies to try to remove the ticks. These methods are not as effective and may cause the tick to regurgitate its stomach contents into the bite, increasing the risk of infection. A vomiting tick. Following the removal of the ticks, the family should take the following steps. Save the tick, if possible. Place the removed ticks either submerged in a sealed screw-top container with 70 to 90% alcohol or dry in a Ziploc bag. Label the container with the date and location of the bite. This can be helpful for identification by a healthcare professional or a local public health department, which may offer tick testing services. Consult the healthcare provider. It is highly recommended that all 3 individuals schedule an appointment with a healthcare provider to discuss the tick bites and their travel history. Monitor for symptoms. For the next 30 days, all 3 individuals should be vigilant for any signs of a tick-borne illness. These can include rash. A bullseye rash, erythema migrans, is a hallmark of Lyme disease, but other types of rashes can also occur. It is important to note that not everyone with Lyme disease develops a rash. Flu-like symptoms, fever, chills, headache, fatigue, and muscle or joint aches. As usual, I had a lot of fun with Dr. Griffin's case. I thoroughly enjoyed the TWiP universe and listening to real science on a regular basis. And real is in capitals, just for good measure. We do real science. Keep up the good word and fight the good fight. Kind regards from Joseph. That was very thorough.
That was. Well, Justin writes, greetings, dear hosts. Or should I say dear hosts? Is a DEER hosts. For the recent case of small black objects on the World Travelers, my guess would be ectoplasmids. parasites, deer tick. Although the Asian longhorn tick would also be a potential. They could be distinguished by their coloration pattern. These little pests were likely picked up quite recently since one has not yet latched on. However, with the variety of exposure potentials, I think testing the ticks that had attached would be wise, particularly if these are deer ticks. Hoping to win a book. All the best, Justin.
Paul writes, returning book winner, leading off with the cover image of a Schistosoma monsoni egg on Des Pommiers' Parasitic Diseases, 8th edition. The case of embedded and crawling things, lots of questions here. What might these be and how do we identify them? Likely these are Ixodes scapularis ticks, deer tick, black-legged tick. Save the removed tick in a container for identification by a professional and or compare with a reliable online guide such as MayoClinic.org's guide to tick species. Nymphs are poppy seed size. Adults are sesame seed size. Oh my gosh, I'm getting hungry. I want a sesame bagel, Daniel.
Oh, I'd love that too.
The poppy-sized, seed-sized embedded tick could be a nymph. The variable or larger ones could be partially engorged adults. Is the travel history relevant? Yes, Ixodes ticks are present in the areas visited, and tick-borne diseases, including Lyme disease and babesiosis, as well as less common pathogens like Anaplasma and Ehrlichia, are endemic in the northeastern U.S. The UK travel introduces an extremely low risk for viral tick-borne encephalitis. There are several other tick-borne diseases. Co-infection with multiple organisms is common, and this vector could easily be Dr. Hickham's favorite. Are there any timing issues that impact what we do? Yes, duration of embedded tick, 36 hours is required to transmit Lyme disease. Also, the prophylactic treatment for Lyme disease is indicated for cases occurring in an endemic area where an Ixodes scapularis tick was embedded for at least 36 hours and within 72 hours of tick removal. Prophylaxis for an adult is 200 milligrams of doxycycline. Should we try to remove these, and if so, how? Yes, remove the tick using narrow-tipped tweezers, grasp the tick close to the skin surface and tick mouth parts. Gently pull straight up. Do not squeeze the tick. Do not use chemical products or a match to try to remove the tick. Wash the wound and hands following removal. Save the tick in a container for identification. Any testing or treatment indicated. Testing not indicated unless symptoms develop. Prophylactic treatment may be indicated as described above. Keep up the good work. Christina.
Kira writes, salutations to the science stewards, the TWiP team. First off, I wanted to say congrats to Dr. Daniel Griffin for publishing the 8th edition of Parasitic Diseases. The organisms on the cover is not a blob. In fact, it's Schistosoma mansoni. My parasitology professor at the University of Washington helped us remember this by saying, it's like Charles Manson with a knife. As for my guess for this week's case, I believe these 3 individuals have come into contact with a tick species, likely a deer tick, Ixodes scapularis, due to their travel history. To identify the parasite as a tick, counting the legs is a good start. Larvae have 3 pairs of legs, while the nymphs and adults have 4 pairs. Our trio has spent a lot of time outdoors recently, so they really could have picked it up from any of their hiking adventures. Travel history is relevant when determining risk for Lyme disease, as the risk is much higher in Long Island. 50% of ticks carry Lyme, and Cape Cod, 38% of ticks carry Lyme, than in Scotland, 10% of ticks carry Lyme. In the early stages, Lyme disease is sometimes tricky to diagnose because symptoms can mimic other illnesses, and the antibody tests may not be accurate until 4 to 6 weeks after infection. It sounded like these individuals didn't see the characteristic bullseye rash, but it would be good to get tested regardless. We should definitely try to remove these because the longer the ticks are attached, the higher the risk for getting tick paralysis There's some grammatical issue there that I can't get to the bottom of.
Forgetting tick paralysis.
Oh, yeah, there we are. Thank you. But don't worry, tick paralysis is temporary, assuming the tick is removed promptly. Additionally, after consulting the Parasitic Diseases book, I found that Ixodes ticks can be also vectors of rickettsia, viruses, bacteria, and protozoa. Thanks for another great case. Warmly, Kira.
All right. John writes, greetings, esteemed paranauts. The silhouette on the textbook cover appears to be a Schistosoma mansoni. Clues in case 261 led me to the archive episode and rear of the textbook for Pediculus humanus and potentially capitis in addition. These are better known as lice or body and head louses. The body louse differs by retreating into clothing along feeding on the skin and can be identified by microscopy. All the place in the travel history report having lice, including Cape Cod, where the family noticed the issue beginning. I'm unsure if timing could reveal more distinctly the origin with egg-laying periods or otherwise. Body lice can carry disease as the only vectors of Rickettsia prowazaki, causing epidemic typhus, Rocalla quintana, trench fever, and Borrelia recurrentis, according to the textbook. Removing lice is recommended because continued itching can introduce bacterial fungal infection along with disease risks. Permethrin 5% can be applied to the entire body for 8 to 10 hours with frequent change of garments and bedding. Laundering should include heating for recommended temperature and period. If head lice are also involved, careful combing methods, shaving, and topical treatments can be applied. I hope they didn't get any lousy diseases.
Angela writes, hello from Bristol, UK. The weather here has been mostly hot and humid, ideal if you're a pathogenic fungus, which I am not. Today has been very agreeable with the temperature staying below 25 C. My eagerly awaited copy of Parasitic Diseases has yet to reach me, so for now I'm making do with the online version. Okay, so you already won, so I'm going to take away the number from your name. Okay. Is the cover picture a Schistosoma mansoni egg, like Charles Manson with a knife? I think that the mystery parasites from episode 261 are Ixodes ticks, but we cannot tell the specific species from the given travel history. They might be European Ixodes ricinus or North American Ixodes scapularis. Since multiple ticks may have been present on each individual for days, I think we have to assume potential exposure to Babesia, Lyme disease, Powassan virus disease, and anaplasmosis. I'd photographed the ticks in situ in order to utilize a tick identification service before gently removing them using tweezers and cleansing the wounds with soap. Let's assume that I've done that and both species are present because our patients frolicked in the grass every time they came near deer or sheep. Therefore, I'd need to consider each disease in turn. Our patients report no prior health concerns, so Babesia ought to be self-limiting. No treatment is required unless persistent symptoms develop later, in which case I'd use combination therapy of atovaquone and azithromycin. The CDC website recommends a single dose of doxycycline as a prophylaxis against Lyme disease, provided the patient is not allergic, pregnant, or lactating. Powassan virus disease is rare, so I wouldn't worry about it unless one of the patients develops neurological symptoms. Anaplasmosis would need to be treated with doxycycline within a few days of symptoms appearing. Alternatives, if contraindicated, are tetracycline or minocycline. Before I send our asymptomatic and thus far apparently healthy patients home, I'd give them a list of symptoms that I'd need to know about if they develop in the next few weeks, and I'd send them the link to the CDC's Tick Bite bot. I'd advise them to bring a tick removal tool, insect repellent spray, and long socks when walking or frolicking in tick-infested areas. And lastly, I would send the ticks to a tick surveillance scheme. If the patients did not self-report any symptoms, I would nevertheless, I want to point out a little contradiction there. Symptoms can only be self-reported. No one can see your symptoms. That's the definition of it. So self is not needed. Sorry, Angela.
I always get the signs and symptoms muddled up in my head anyway. Yeah, maybe that's the same for Angela.
If the patients did not report any symptoms, I would nevertheless do a few follow-up checks with them in the next few weeks because even mild symptoms would need to be investigated. In conclusion, ticks carry too many diseases, and there ought to be a law that animal vector species are allowed a maximum of one parasite each. That's very funny. Very funny, Angela. I'm glad you have a sense of humor. So, yes, Angela won a book last time, and we're figuring out how to get it to you. Actually, I think it was shipped out on Wednesday, so you'll probably get it in about 6 months, given the post overseas, right? Okay, we're back to Christina.
Michelle and Alexander from the First Vienna Parasitology Passion Club write, Dear practitioners of parasitology, the clinical presentation and travel history point towards the presence of Ixodes tick nymphs. These arthropods are endemic to both Scotland and the US and can be vectors for a number of infectious and non-infectious diseases. Removal and identification of the ticks is recommended. Specific testing for tick-borne diseases like Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, ehrlichiosis, etc. is only warranted if symptoms appear. In some cases, antibiotic PEP may be considered, so that would be post-exposure prophylaxis. While rare, tick-borne encephalitis is present in Scotland, and vaccinating for it may be a consideration before hiking in the area, especially during spring and summertime. While not an infectious disease, tick bites can also lead to alpha-gal syndrome, an allergic reaction to red meat. Thank you for this great case. All the best.
Ben writes, Dear TWiPers, the something small, dark, and about the size of a poppy seed embedded in their skin sounds like Ixodes scapularis, the tick. These should be removed with forceps tweezers as quickly as possible. Fine tip forceps work well. Ideally, you would get a summer job at the Connecticut Agricultural Experimental Station for a summer as a tick tech, pulling them off of Peromyscus mice. That said, the CDC website has a nice diagram. The mobile, presumably non-engorged one is not really a problem. The ones embedded are an issue. These ticks may carry Borrelia burgdorferi, the causative agent of Lyme disease, but take a while to transmit it. If the ticks had the opportunity to have been embedded long enough for transmission, testing them may be prudent. If any Lyme disease symptoms arrive in those bitten, testing of the human would be prudent. The lack of a bullseye is not proof of no infection. Also, rabbits are not a great host for Borrelia burgdorferi. The NHS has a website warning about ticks in Scotland. If the ticks are from Scotland, they definitely had time to transmit pathogens. Hopefully, there's no infection, but if there is, get well soon. Ben in Drisley, Liverpool.
Sarah writes, Hello, TWiP doctors. I'm Sarah, and I'm from Avon Lake, Ohio. I hope I'm getting this in on time. This is my first time writing in, but I've been listening since the winter of 2022. I was working from home one day during my previous job as a payroll processor and was having an especially miserable day and needed something to listen to. I have a zoology degree from Kent State and wanted to work with amphibians, but that didn't pan out. So unfortunately, I ended up in payroll. Amphibians to payroll, huh? Parasitology was my favorite class, so I searched parasite in Spotify, found TWiP, and I was hooked. I've since quit my payroll job and have enrolled back in school to work on a second degree in biology and hopefully do something in the parasitology world. I'm fortunate to have a very supportive family and a husband who works at the local community college, which has partnership programs with bigger universities in Ohio. So going back to school at 40 years old has been easier than I ever thought it could be. I even got to write a research paper on schistosomiasis last year for one of my classes, way more fun than processing payroll. If I hadn't found TWiP that day, I don't know that I would be where I am today. So I am forever grateful to you for playing a huge part in my decision to get back to my roots in biology. I definitely feel like I'm back where I belong. I just have to mention, too, that my son, who was 6 when I started listening, asked me if they made TWiP action figures because he wanted me to buy them for him, and Dixon was his favorite. That is so funny. TWiP action figures.
Well, we should get him.
Well, you can't. I have an action figure here of me. someone
True,
had
yeah.
me. It's a bobblehead. Actually, it's not an action
Yeah.
figure.
We could
I
get
don't.
Lego figures with our heads.
Yeah. My guess is kind of short, but I hope to send in future guesses with more detail. My guess for the case in TWiP 261 is black-legged deer ticks. I think the smaller poppy seed-sized creatures were nymphs, and the bigger ones were adults or ones that had been feeding and so were engorged. According to the back section of parasitic diseases, aha, Daniel, that neglected part of the book, huh? These ticks are common throughout the eastern U.S., so hiking in Long Island and Cape Cod would be relevant. I also attach a picture of what I think is the same kind of tick from the case that made its way into our house last weekend. We are redoing our bathroom, and I was using a sponge to smooth out the coat of mud on the wall. My husband left the bucket and sponge in the garage, and when I went to wipe down the second batch of mud, I noticed this nasty critter on the sponge. Luckily, it wasn't on any of us or our cat, and my husband and son had fun burning it with a lighter out in the driveway. Oh, man, it's so brutal. We have a ton of deer around here, and they're constantly walking through our yard. Oh, and I'm pretty sure the picture on the cover of Parasitic Diseases is a Schistosoma mansoni egg. And Sarah sends a picture of her sponge with the tick on it. It's got the stripy back. It looks like the
Looks like that
Dermacenter, right?
The colorful one, yeah. Looks nice.
Well, I like how Sarah tells a lot of different stories in addition to the guess. That's very nice.
It's also nice that she found biology again after being in payroll. It's really nice. Yeah.
It's great. I'm glad that we helped to do it.
Yes.
All right. What else, Daniel? What else do we need to know?
Well, what are people thinking? So I think we had almost a consensus. We had one outlier who thought it was body louse there, which it wasn't. So no, I think people had fun with this case, so I'm glad. So let's go through it. So Christina, Vincent, any comments before we dig in? What do you guys think? Are you with the plurality?
I am. I was really quite interested to read about the different approaches to what you do when you have a tick. When I have a tick, I just pull it off and then I actually forget about it and hope for the best, which is maybe not the best approach. Although here in Scotland, actually, I think the incidence for Lyme disease is probably highest in Scotland compared to the rest of the UK, but it's still relatively low. I think it's probably less than 10% of ticks that are actually infected in hotspots where they look at it. And I did actually find an interesting paper that I can maybe put in the show note about the incidence and management of tick bites in Scotland, but the Highlands of Scotland are definitely a bit of a hotspot for ticks. So they have kind of estimated incidence figures comparable with some European countries where Lyme disease is considered endemic. Some listeners mentioned tick-borne encephalitis. I think there was a suspected case of tick-borne encephalitis somewhere in the Highlands in 2019, but not confirmed. But I think there have been maybe 3 or so reports of tick-borne encephalitis in England. So it is probably in the ticks, but maybe not such high risk. And I think there's very, very, very little human babesiosis in the UK and in Scotland. Not sure about anaplasmosis. I didn't have time to look that up. So I suppose if they picked up their ticks in Scotland, I would maybe worry a little bit less than I would if they'd picked up their ticks on the east coast of the US, where many more ticks are infected with Lyme disease. And also, we've had multiple cases of babesiosis on TWiP before, and they were all kind of, they were all on the east coast of the US. I would probably worry a little bit more. I was thinking, so they returned on Sunday or on Saturday, and then, they were hiking on the Saturday in the Cairngorms, and then they were walking on Long Island. So they must have, I don't know, it must have been the next day. So I don't know if they would have maybe noticed the ticks previously if they'd picked them up in Scotland. I don't know. So I think the ticks are probably US ticks, but I can't be 100% sure. But also kind of quite a high number. So maybe that's it's also. I've heard that, although that's just anecdotal evidence that I have, that you can come back from a hike in your parts of the world and be covered in poppy seeds. But that might just be anecdotal evidence that someone's told me and I maybe picked it up.
No, it's actually true. Yeah, the timing you have right. So they're in the Outer Hebrides, Harrison Lewis, and then Saturday they're in the Highlands, right? Loch Ness, the Cairngorms. Sunday they're on Long Island. Wednesday they're up in Cape Cod. So really bouncing around. And I like the geography, right? Because it presents, I think, a lot of what you talked about. Different ticks in different areas, different incidents of different diseases, different pathogens in different ticks. So a lot of our emailers did well there. So we're familiar with the black-legged deer ticks, the Ixodes scapularis here in Long Island, but we also have other ticks as well, and different pathogens and different ticks. So sometimes it's helpful, if possible, to figure out what type of tick it is. So you can look at it, you can take a nice photo of it, you can blow it up. There even are apps. I have this app on my phone, Detict, Detickt. It's free, I think. And you actually zoom in, you take a picture, where are you? And it can actually identify, and that can sort of help you with this distinction. The next, you do want to remove these. We don't like leaving ticks on people. And the timing issue is, I think people did a good job of bringing this up. Most of the drive here and the numbers that people quote are related to studies looking at Borrelia burgdorferi, so the pathogen that causes Lyme disease. And you do not get bitten and instantly get Lyme disease. It probably takes 36 to 48 hours before there's transmission of that pathogen from the tick. So it takes a certain period of time.
Daniel, do we know why that is? Do the ticks, do the Borrelia, need to move to the salivary glands, or why is there that delay? So initially they're not there. So they start to feed and then you get the migration of the pathogen. Okay. So, yeah. And how is that for Babesia, for example, or Anaplasma? That's different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's different. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's different, right? So, what we start to think about, and this whole, recommendation for the 200 milligrams of post-exposure prophylaxis, PEP, is targeted towards Lyme disease, right? But those studies are all done based on Borrelia burgdorferi, Lyme disease. It's different with the other pathogens. And I don't know if I ever told the embarrassing story where we were talking about, doxycycline for post-exposure prophylaxis for sexual activity versus tick bites. And I think it was Rachel Gordon, one of the, in our, was like, boy, I wonder about, what's more common. And I was like, I think on Long Island, it's tick bites. And she's like, that was not a serious question, Daniel. I was like, oh, sorry. But I think it might be, right? I was just starting to think about how much doxycycline are you going to be giving to people on Long Island every time they go hiking, right? And you start running into what they run into in certain areas, where you start creating resistance in the pathogens because there's just so much exposure to these antibiotics. So these are some of the things. What tick are we worried about? What is the tick species? Trying to figure that out. How long have they been there? Because that's going to impact the risk. Are we going to be doing doxycycline to, it sounds like this is these people are hiking all the time, probably getting ticks all over the place. So are we going to be throwing doxycycline at them every time there's a scenario like this, or just reinforcing the education? Like, after you go hiking, you've got to do tick checks, really try to get them off before you have a problem. And then this, I think, is also really important. You want to be really careful not to do knee-jerk serology testing. You can actually do PCR testing during that acute period of time. But what we often see is someone does serology right away, and then the person maybe develops problems, over the next, days to weeks, but you've got this negative test. Well, you're going to have a negative test because it's going to take 3 weeks for that IgG to turn positive, and the IgM testing is just incredibly nonspecific.
I've actually done a Borrelia burgdorferi PCR in the last century when I was leading a practical course on molecular techniques for lab technicians. That just kind of popped into my head. So, yeah, why not do a PCR? If it was available then, I think that might have been maybe 1997 or thereabouts.
Yeah, if someone ends up like acutely ill in the hospital, a couple things. One is the Hickham's comment is that people end up in the hospital often have more than one. That's why they end up in the hospital. They might have Lyme disease and Babesia, Lyme disease and Ehrlichia, Lyme disease and Anaplasma. And so it's important to be thinking about both. And then there is the fact that since serology is going to take a while, a lot of times you're treating ahead of time. And remember, the doxycycline is not going to cover Babesia, though it is going to cover a lot of the others here. But yeah, there are molecular tests. We can actually do PCR looking for a number of tick-borne pathogens.
Well, I agree.
Sorry, Vincent.
No. Sorry. I mean, there were ticks, clearly ticks. I don't think you could tell where they got them. I was thinking, you get on a plane, you take showers before you. So 3 people, maybe one of them would have seen it, and then the other 3 would have seen it over in Scotland. So maybe they're mostly American ticks.
Yeah, I mean, that was my impression, that they probably got all these up in Cape Cod.
Yeah. Right. Crawling under the log.
Yeah.
But so what was the outcome, Daniel? Everybody okay?
Yeah, everybody did fine. They went and removed all the ticks. Nobody developed any problems. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's good to know.
Let's give away a book to a lucky guesser. We only had 7, I think.
We had 7 novel ones, right? We had some returning champions, several returning champions.
Let's do a random number between 1 and 7. That would be 1. Number 1. That is Angelica. That's cool. Angelica's in Sweden. Another expensive shipping.
Okay.
So, Angelica, send your address and telephone to TWiP at microbe.tv. We're not going to call you. Don't worry. We just need it for the mailing. TWiP at microbe.tv, and put in the subject line, TWiP 263 book winner. And we will get your book out. I think we have a few left that are signed by Daniel and Dixon. Because, after those are gone, we're not going to have any more Dixon signings. We're just going to have Daniel, probably. You'll be the only one that has signed them.
But then you will get a book that actually is called Des Pommiers, Parasitic Diseases. So that's right. Maybe a little consolation prize.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get like Chuck Knersch, one of the other authors, to come in and sign. I don't know if we'll ever get Peter Hotez or Guads to come on into the incubator to sign for us, but.
Christina, you have a hero for us today?
I do, actually. And actually, I have a very special hero today, a personal hero, so to speak. So I want to honor a hero that I had the pleasure to know personally and one that I like very much. So my hero today is Dr. Lawrence Tetley, who died very recently, so in the last 2 weeks, actually. So Lawrence, he was a pioneering microscopist who focused on parasites throughout his long career here at the University of Glasgow. And he was an expert on electron microscopy, a technique which obviously has made huge contribution to understanding the cell biology of many parasites. But in the case of Lawrence, particularly trypanosomes and its relatives. And actually, I did, there's always an issue with kind of open access papers and publications, but I did actually copy a really amazing electron micrograph of a Cryptosporidium parvum sporozoite apical region in our show notes, because that is open access, so people can maybe have a look at that. So Lawrence, he worked closely with Keith Vickerman, who supervised his PhD work. And if you need a wee reminder about Keith Vickerman, he was our hero on TWiP 233, which was aired in April 2024. So going back to Lawrence, the title of his PhD thesis presented in 1986 was Ultrastructural Studies in Parasitic Flagellates. So he contributed particularly to the understanding of the variable surface coat in trypanosomes, which essentially enables the African trypanosomes to evade a host immune system, and obviously, which we all know and are very familiar with, causes sleeping sickness in sub-Saharan Africa. So Lawrence actually imaged many different parasites from schistosomes to Theileria, and he made very many diverse contributions as a result. And he was first and foremost a technologist. And I think that is something that we maybe don't celebrate enough. People who are really excellent at particular techniques. So he was also building and modifying and repairing instrumentation. And he was working very closely with academic colleagues and industry collaborators to develop novel techniques and applications for electron microscopy. And you'll find his electron micrographs in many parasitology research articles coming out of Glasgow and elsewhere. He was really kind of focusing on surfaces and subcellular structures and interactions with host cells. So, you can have a look, for example, at the flagellar attachment zones in some of his electron micrograms. And it was just really quite amazing. So do go and have a wee Google and have a wee look at that. And one of Lawrence's key attributes really was to also exercise caution in the interpretation of electron micrographs. So I think that is also quite important, because sometimes we see cool things and we think, well, we maybe sometimes over-interpret, but he was not one of those. So he was frequently the first to apply new approaches to parasitology questions, and his careful and thorough work advanced many aspects of parasitology. He was a very enthusiastic colleague who had time for everyone, and you could readily be persuaded to spend the morning perusing hundreds of electron micrographs predating the digital era and stored in countless box files in a cluttered office. And often these conversations would extend to the pub in the evening. And I think, Lawrence would have got along really well with Dixon. I think they would have had a lot to say to each other. I got to know Lawrence when I first became involved in a diploma in tropical medicine and hygiene. He was involved in this long before me, and he spent many hours setting up the microscopy slides up for our mandatory microscopy training in diagnostic parasitology. And he was diligently setting up workstations so students could learn efficiently and well. And he remained involved in this every year, even after he retired. And he has taught the students so much in that time. And if nobody could find a parasite on a tricky specimen slide, Lawrence sure could. And without Lawrence, I don't think I would have the confidence in teaching microscopy diagnosis of parasites that I now have. So I'm really grateful for that. So for me and for many of my colleagues and friends, Lawrence is a true and worthy hero of parasitology. And I think we'll miss him very much.
Very nice.
So that's my hero. Yeah, it's nice to actually know a hero.
All right, Daniel, have you got a case for us?
We do, and this is part of our theme. This is the second in our trifecta. So here we go. It's the first day of summer camp, and the children are lined up for a parasite check, if you can imagine that. Some of the children have certificates that allow them to bypass the screening. Some of the parents are upset about this process, commenting, "This is not required by the state," and report that this could not be a problem for their children. One by one, the children have their scalps examined. And oh no, 2 of the children are asked to step to the side. The parents of these 2 children are contacted and told that they must address the identified concern before the children can attend the camp. The two children are treated with a topical therapy on their hair with a repeat in 1 week. And the upset parents have several questions that hopefully our listeners can address. So I will give you guys, what is this all about? What is going on? Is anyone suggesting this is a hygiene issue? What is the most sensitive way to look for this problem? How do we know if it's cured? And feel free to talk about the life cycle that may actually feed into all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not going to ask you if they're HIV negative.
And what they've eaten.
No.
Yeah, I think we've had that parasite in our family. I'm not naming names.
Oh, no.
Not naming and shaming.
I have one email I want to read.
Yes, that's fun. A nice one, yep.
From David, who writes, "Dearest TWiPozoites, I thought you'd appreciate this limerick composed by my wife, Dr. Carol Bird. We have both just done the DTMH course in Nagasaki, and she composed this in honor of Claire Rogers of the LSTMH, who came over from London and did such an excellent job of teaching us parasite microscopy." Christina will know who Claire is.
Oh, I do. And I attended her malaria diagnostic course in London, and it was pure amazing.
So here we go, this limerick. "An ignorant fluke, Paragonimus, thought trematodes and cestodes were synonymous, but Claire put him straight and went on to state that all Taenia eggs are anonymous."
That is wonderful.
That is very clever.
Yeah, it is very clever.
Best wishes and thanks so much for all you do. That is TWiP 263. You can find the show notes at microbe.tv/TWiP. You can send in your questions and comments and limericks, and of course, case guesses to TWiP@microbe.tv. And if you enjoy these programs, we'd love your support. Microbe.tv/contribute. Daniel Griffin is at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, parasiteswithoutborders.com. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. And everyone be safe.
Christina Naula is at Glasgow University. Christina Naula on Blue Sky. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. It was a lovely evening, a really good case. I enjoyed it very much. And I'm now also more active on LinkedIn if you want to seek me up there, because that seems to be more fun.
Well, nothing's more fun than Blue Sky.
Well, I get more interaction on LinkedIn than I do on Blue Sky.
Okay.
And on the Instagram as well. I've discovered you recently on the Instagram. I didn't know you were on the Instagram as well. I'm
on the Instagram and also Microbe TV. We both have different accounts. Yeah.
Yep. Following them now.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at microbe.tv. Microbe TV is on Blue Sky. Microbe TV, all one word, .bsky.social. You've been listening. Oh, I'd like to thank the American Society for Microbiology for their support of TWiP and Ronald Jenkins for the music. You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Another TWiP is parasitic.